livestock producers should still be happy, I think, to a certain extent.
Welcome back to the Comstock Channel. We're recording from Commodity Classic in Denver, Colorado this year. Thought I would take a moment and talk with the president of Comstock Investments, Matthew Kruse. He's with us right now. And of course, usually we do a weekly talk about South American conditions. You spent a couple of months down there this winter. It's nice to have you back in the States again, but I thought maybe this time, while we're all kind of busy this week at Commodity Classic, we would do a report from here. Has anything changed since you and I talked last week as far as production estimates down there? I hear maybe some private estimates are starting to come down just a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're seeing that there's been a little bit of lag where people are starting to come to the conclusion that while the crop overall is still going to be a record crop in Brazil. There's no avoiding that at this point, but they are seeing some losses in the south, specifically in Rio Grande do Sul, where we know they got clipped quite a bit from drought. They just went too long there in the January period, and there's losses probably in the statewide, maybe as much as 20%. There's other pockets in Paraná and Mato Grosso do Sul that suffered some losses as well. But I think Rio Grande do Sul is where it got hit the most. And so where USDA's been at 169 million metric tons so far this whole season, they haven't moved. And we've seen a lot of private estimates move above that to 171, 172, up to 174. I've seen as high as 174 at one point. And now you're starting to see it slowly drift back to 171, 170. I've seen one private estimate at 168. And so for the first time, you're seeing estimates drop below what USDA had, not by much, but even so, it basically what we're seeing where the crop started out great. Like it was one of the best starts to Brazilian crop production that we've ever seen, to be honest, in the 25 years that I've lived there and been covering the markets there. But here at the end, especially specifically in January, the parts of the country got clipped, and so it took the edge off, but it's still going to be a record crop overall.
And regardless, I mean, they're starting with a record acreage, so even if production is down a little bit, I mean,
that's right.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, they could lose a couple percent of yield and still have as big a crop as last year, just because they add 1.5 to 3 million acres a year, depending on what commodity prices are doing. And so historically, they've been increasing their acres at 5% a year on average. Now this year is a little less. It was probably closer to 3%, I think. But even 3% on top of 117 million acres, I mean, you're talking 2-3 million acres each year that they're adding. And the only thing that's going to slow that down is just commodity prices, and they're not making money. They're going to pull back on the reins. But as soon as soybean prices move higher, they get excited and they ramp up the expansion again.
So a big concern is the Safra corn crop going in. And you and I were talking just a little bit ago about the progress of the soybean harvest right now. By the way, where would that be as far as that harvest front right now?
So the bulk of it right now is taking place in the center-west region. So you're talking Mato Grosso do Sul, Goiás. That's, in the case of Mato Grosso, I mean, they're already on the back half. I mean, they might be done or be in the last 10% by next week. And so they're already can see the home stretch in Mato Grosso. And then it's going to start to slowly shift east from there and south. And so you're going to start getting to the states like Minas Gerais and Bahia and Maranhão, those places. Rio Grande do Sul and the deep south has just barely started. They're only like 1 or 2%. So they're kind of the last state to wrap up harvest. And that's where we know where yields have been hurt the most.
So in Mato Grosso, do they have a lot of Safra corn there, or where is the center of production?
Half of the Safra corn is in Mato Grosso.
Wow.
Of the Safra corn. Now you take corn production as a whole, and for all three crops in the country, there's still almost 40% of the corn. But in the case of just the second crop, the Safra, it's like 50%. And so it's obviously the most important. Like Paraná is the second largest Safra producing state, but they're a distant second. I want to say they're 20%, 15%, no, excuse me, 15% roughly, I think, of what the safrinha corn production is. And so we're seeing some dryness in that state. And depending on how long that lasts, I mean, it could have an impact, but how much is hard to say because it still comes down to Mato Grosso probably at the end of the day. If Mato Grosso has a good season, Brazil's probably going to have a good season.
So if they're about done with soybean harvest in that state, how much of their corn do you think they would have in by now?
I mean, they're in Mato Grosso. Last week they were already at nearly 70%. So
Really?
they're probably, yeah. I mean, they're right on top of it. They run the combines through. They got the corn planters right behind it. So as of right now, during the Commodity Classic, I don't know when this is going to air. I mean, they're probably 85% done already. And so ideally, they'd like to have 70% of that safrinha corn crop in by February 20th. And now today it's March 3rd, and so they maybe were a little bit behind, but pretty nominal amount. If they get solid rains through April, they'll produce trendline yields. What I'm seeing in the forecast, I'm a little bit focused on what's going to happen in Paraná, because if the ending stocks in Brazil are so tight that if they lose 3 million metric tons, it could still be supportive to the global market. That's 3 million metric tons less that they may want to export, that the U.S. could potentially fill that gap. And so, it's tough to say how much difference that's going to make yet. But that's kind of what we're seeing in the short-term forecast. Is it's turning unusually dry in March.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been that way for a couple of weeks now, right? I think the 10-day outlook is still kind of dry, isn't it?
It's the areas shifted a little bit where they're getting rain back in the south, because prior to this, it was Argentina and Rio Grande do Sul that was dry. Now those areas are getting better rain, but it's Paraná and other parts of the eastern growing regions like São Paulo State, Minas Gerais, Bahia, maybe parts of Goiás that are turning dry. And so there's some safrinha corn grown in those areas. Now, collectively, it might add up to a large amount, but from what I saw in Mato Grosso, which is the largest producing safrinha state that we talked about, they still have adequate moisture in the forecast.
Can you talk about Argentina?
Yeah. I think they got clipped. Their yields, have been projected lower by 3 to 4 million metric tons. But it's the rain has come back now, and it's come back in force. And so I think it's stopped it from getting worse. I don't know that it's the yield projection that it'll go back up at this point, because they went through kind of extended period there in January and early February where it was dry and yields got hurt. But I think they'll go back to producing 48, 49 million metric tons, which is for them is a good crop. It's a little bit less than what they were looking for. They're probably looking for 51, 52 million metric tons. But so it has an impact, but they're a distant third place when it comes to soybean and corn production. So
now Argentina, they produce quite a bit of wheat. When would they plant that, do you think?
Wheat production, I mean, it's really spread out. They have a really wide planting window. In the case of corn, I mean, they'll start planting corn in September, and they might not get done until February. So they almost have two crops in Argentina as well.
Wow!
But it's interesting how they ramp up planting, and then it seems like it kind of stops. Like they take a break in November, and then they start again in December. It's kind of odd that way, but yeah. So I think the yield projections are positive for wheat in that case.
So you and I have had a chance to talk with some farmers here at the Commodity Classic this year. Have you picked up a sense of the attitude of the people here at the show this year? Are they pretty upbeat?
Well, I think they're trying to be. What's happening in today's markets, where we're down 10 in corn and 15 in soybeans, doesn't help. But I think they're eager to see. I know that like USDA Secretary Rollins had quite a big crowd at her talk yesterday, and she gave a kind of rally the troop type speech that we're here for you. We're gonna get these checks out to you, and so I hope that happens. I hope I think the USDA does owe us some money for kind of the lag on their projections and updating the balance sheets that kind of artificially depressed prices for longer than they needed to be. But what we really need is probably a new farm bill. We need, the 45Z. We need some direction on how we're, what the rules are going to be to produce renewable fuels and help get these new industries established, like the SAF, things like that. And I know that the current administration hasn't been there very long, and they have a ton of things and other priorities. But I'm hoping this will eventually get to it, be at the top of the list, because that's we're back to being contentious with a lot of our export neighbors like China, and now apparently we're not going to get along with Canada and Mexico, who have been good export grain buyers and ag production buyers of the United States. And so I'm just concerned for our export markets, and that's what's being reflected in the markets today, right? Because it's they're seeing what's happening, and tomorrow, March 4th, is tariff day, and that could all end tomorrow, right? Trump sends a tweet at 3 a.m. that tariffs are postponed, or we got a deal done, and it's the greatest deal ever, and so it could all end tomorrow. But as of right now, that's what we're facing, and so I just like to see us. I don't understand why we can't just replace the export market with domestic driven market, with these programs. But they do require some assistance from government to help them get started. And right now is not a popular time to be seeking any sort of a financial assistance from government when they're making costs. And so that's the focus right now is in the opposite direction in the government.
Well, I tell you what, it's been a great show. From what I understand, they're talking like maybe a record turnout this year. Well over 10,000 people, I understand, and it has been quite a show. A lot of great technology, a lot of great speakers here at the show as well. In fact, we're going to have our own learning session on Tuesday. That'll be at 10 o'clock in the morning. So we're looking forward to that. We'll have Eric Snodgrass, he is with Nutrien, and then we'll also have Karen Braun of Reuters along with us, and Matthew on the panel. And we'll be fielding questions from the audience and talking for about an hour there about current topics. So we're looking forward to that as well. It's hard to believe we're going to be traveling home after this show, and this will be airing while we're kind of wrapping up things at the show. But meeting season is almost over. Before long, you'll be hitting the planter.
That's right. 45 days, it could be planting already. We seem to be getting an earlier start every year. At least, last year we could have been planting by April 15th if we wanted to. I think it's just based off the crop insurance when I start on my farm. And so the earliest I planted soybeans was April 23rd, and I think it's possible I could break that record. We could start even earlier than that this year. So, we'll see.
Well, we're looking forward to that. We've been asking everybody at the show, are you planting more corn or more beans this year? I'll ask you, are you going to plant more corn this year?
My rotation, I think, for the foreseeable future is kind of going to be 2/3 corn, 1/3 beans, and I kind of want to stick to that rotation. I don't like to chase the markets too much, and I'll manage that risk with futures and options if need be. And so that I'm not there's risk just doing corn on corn. That's what obviously the market is expecting more corn. I think the market is calling for that, but we'll see what happens. But I try and balance those the corn and the beans, because I think you still get a better corn yield rotating with the beans, and so try and keep some in the mix.
If only we could grow coffee and cocoa in Iowa, you'd be all set, right?
Yeah, the commodity to produce right now is coffee. So the coffee producers are pretty happy right now. Livestock producers should still be happy, I think, to a certain extent, but I know their costs are coming up too. But
it's going to be an interesting year, that's for sure. Well, I'm glad you could take a couple of moments and talk with us and get us updated. I appreciate that. So thanks a bunch, and I wish you safe travels. We'll talk to you in Iowa later down the road. Matthew Kruse with us here, the president of Comstock Investments. And that'll do it for this episode. We appreciate you joining us. For producer Brian Hopkins. I'm Marlon Bowling. We'll catch you next time right here on the Comstock Channel.
Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and/or options is substantial, and each investor and/or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.